Most people believe they make conscious decisions, that they choose what they feel, what they want, what they avoid. Carl Jung disagreed. He said something deeply unsettling. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Take a moment to let that sink in. How many choices in your life seem to repeat themselves? How many patterns return even when you swear this time will be different? The same relationships, the same fears, the same inner blocks. And that quiet feeling that something is pulling you, even when you cannot explain what it is. Jung called this force the unconscious, and for him it was not a minor part of the mind. It was the real center of command of the human psyche. The unconscious does not speak in words. It speaks through sensations, through impulses, through dreams, through automatic reactions. It shows up when you feel anxious for no clear reason, when you procrastinate on something important without knowing why, when you react too strongly to someone, or when you feel an emptiness you cannot name. The conscious mind likes to believe it is in control, but most of the time, it is only explaining decisions that were already made internally. Emotional decisions, instinctive decisions, old decisions. Jung believed that much of human suffering comes from this invisible conflict. We live as if we are conscious, while being governed by forces we have never faced. And here is the uncomfortable truth. What you ignore in yourself does not disappear. It intensifies. Everything you refuse to look at within yourself continues to exist. It simply finds other ways to express itself, sometimes through fear, sometimes through self-sabotage, sometimes through choices that quietly pull you away from the life you want. Jung called one of the most important parts of the unconscious the shadow. The shadow is everything you were taught to reject in yourself. Traits that were labeled unacceptable, repressed desires, denied emotions, anger, envy, vulnerability, the fear of not being enough. Not because they were wrong in themselves, but because at some point you learned they were not allowed. So you did what most people do. You pushed them down. But here is a truth few are willing to accept. What you repress does not obey you. What you acknowledge does. The shadow does not want to destroy you. It wants to be seen. When it is not integrated, it appears projected onto others. You criticize in others exactly what you refuse to recognize in yourself. You feel irrational reactions towards certain people without knowing why. Jung once said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. It is not the other person who provokes you. It is something within you that remains unconscious." Modern society has taught us to run away from ourselves. Stay busy, stay distracted, produce, consume, don't stop, don't feel, don't look inward. And the more we run, the louder the unconscious tries to get our attention. Through chronic exhaustion, through constant anxiety, through the strange feeling of being lost even when everything seems fine. That emptiness is not a lack of success. It is not a lack of people. It is not a lack of stimulation. It is a lack of inner contact. Jung believed that real psychological maturity begins when a person dares to ask a simple but uncomfortable question. What am I avoiding seeing in myself? It is not a pleasant question, but it is a liberating one. Because self-knowledge is not about becoming perfect. It is about becoming whole. And wholeness means acknowledging both the light and the darkness. There is something deeply transformative about stopping the war against parts of yourself. about no longer pretending certain emotions do not exist, about accepting that you are contradictory, complex, human. The unconscious does not want your suffering, it wants balance. But it can only achieve that when consciousness is willing to listen. Perhaps that is why Jung said the greatest privilege of life is not happiness, but awareness. Because happiness comes and goes, but awareness changes how you suffer and eventually how you live. When you begin to observe your patterns instead of only reacting to them, when you ask why instead of immediately blaming yourself, something shifts, not dramatically, but profoundly. Maybe today is a good day to pause for a few minutes, without distractions, without noise, and ask yourself honestly, what patterns repeat in my life? What emotions do I avoid feeling? What parts of myself do I automatically reject? Not to judge yourself, but to begin to understand. Because as Jung quietly reminds us, what we do not confront within ourselves will continue to decide our path for us. And only when you turn inward do you stop calling fate what has always been unconscious.